Welcome to Distro Podcast.
Yeah, on this episode of the Distro Podcast, we welcome our guest, Stiepan Kovac, who is the CEO here with QRC. Stiepan, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. And thanks for having me on this show. I look forward to talking about quantum-resistant cryptography, and I'm interested to hear about your questions.
Yeah, for sure. So Stiepan, to get started, it'd be great to just turn the time over to you, have you share about yourself, your background, and your journey, of kind of where, how you got to getting things going with QRC. So yeah, let's have you share anything that you're willing to share with us.
Sure. So first of all, we started with QRC in 2019 in Switzerland, actually in the Fribourg area where I still live to this date. Meanwhile, we made it into an international company. We opened the QRC Americas, then America specifically in Virginia before COVID. We moved it to Maryland shortly after. It joined the quantum startup foundry there in the University of Maryland, and so that was quite a journey, of course, to get from Fribourg to just by Washington DC, but we are there now, and we happen to have developed in the meantime our existing encryption solutions into a memory-safe stack, which is what the US White House recommends since the beginning of this year in terms of programming languages. So it's not exaggeration to say that our current software stack is the most advanced available quantum-resistant / post-quantum set of solutions on the market, and with a unique specificity, which is that we enhance AES, so the advanced encryption standard, meaning where others stop, which is typically NIST level 5, AES 256 for those familiar with it, that's where we start, and we go beyond, namely providing 512-bit symmetric encryption and coherently adapting the asymmetric side of things, so key exchange digital signatures to that same security level, which again is unique to our offering. And I already slipped a bit into the offering, so I guess you would have some other questions before I carry on.
It's all good. Yeah, no problem. So tell us a little bit about your background, like what was, where did you study quantum computing and all that from, an early age, or what sparked your interest in getting something like this started?
Yes, so I did cybersecurity studies first and foremost, and I specialized with the master's degree in ICT security and an orientation into applied cryptography. That's what got me into exploring quantum-resistant cryptography proper. So in essence, when I did my master's studies, which is not that a long time ago, it was 8 years ago when I completed them, on the curriculum, there was nothing about quantum safe or post-quantum, quantum-resistant, whichever way you choose to call it, cryptography. And as I was doing my master's thesis, I identified that this was one of the biggest blind spots if we want to secure whichever system. In that precise case, it was a contactless loyalty points and rewards system. And so I dived deeper into that aspect, how to have the most secure possible communications, in that precise case, contactless, and for the case that someone still is able to grab the raw data flow, that it has the best possible encryption applied to it, so that nobody, even with the most powerful computer available to them, could break that communication. And as mentioned, this is what actually brought me into the strand of research that's called, if we want to use a scientific term, we believe our company name actually is the closest, quantum resistant cryptography, meaning cryptography that's brought to a level that will resist quantum computers up to a large extent. Nothing is secure in the absolute, but there are sufficient security margins, more than sufficient in the case of what we are proposing and implementing, that you can foresee the predictable evolution of quantum computing, and also some less predictable things, such as how it will be combined with machine learning. And so there is already talk of quantum machine learning. But back to your question, there was first this, which is not the case in general, but in this case was made a priority, this interest I had into enhancing what's already done in terms of symmetric cryptography, and so namely AES, because of course AES is resistant to an extent to quantum computing, and is recognized as such by recommendations and guidelines, as well as rules, such as, for instance, CNSA2 for classified information, which is basically stating that one has to use at least AES 256 for classified info, but that's the minimum. On the other hand, there was not really something for when one wants to go beyond that very minimum entry level and even debated in some cases quantum resistance, on top of which there are all those classical attacks on cryptography, in this precise case AES, but not only, which are very practical. For instance, using some side channel attack, someone can steal the root key of a SIM card that itself uses AES as part of the mileage protocol for authentication, and thereby they can steal your mobile ID, they can steal your phone number, basically, that way, and then impersonate you and whatnot. So in that whole context, and having in mind that the scope of that academic work was on mobile scenarios, so mobile contactless payments, or points and rewards, more precisely there, but sometimes it's at the border between both. We had to make sure that there is indeed some mechanism in place that will also resist those very immediate attacks, so beyond just the question of quantum. But it turns out that, again, speaking of the AES, there is a way to enhance the resistance of it, both against those classical attacks and the more advanced emerging attacks, such as quantum attacks, because essentially, and so that's the gist of our core innovation, is by fixing the key schedule of AES, which otherwise is differentially weak, meaning you can guess information just through having a few traces of its execution. In the case of side channel attack, you can guess the full key. There, by making that part cryptographically secure, there is not anymore such possibility to cheat and just with the partial information extract the full information and the key, because contrary to the legacy AES key schedule, which is using logical XOR functions for the key schedule, the key scheduling, here we are using hash-based constructions where one round does not reveal information, so the subkey in one round does not reveal information regarding the subkey in another round, and thus, even if you have almost all of the subkeys still does not give you the original key. You really need to have the full trace if you were to be able to reconstitute the original key, which raises the bar a lot against for those local attackers. But at the same time, doing those improvements enables to go up in key size without shaking the foundations of the cipher and without making it weaker, because there are things such as related key attacks which occur specifically on AES with key size higher than 128, which is the base key size for AES, and only considered for practical reasons in quantum resistant cipher specifications for efficiency, basically, but it's not really quantum resistant, as opposed to the bigger sizes 192.256, which are quantum resistant in theory, but which are exposed to related key attacks, which again may turn out being very practically exploitable with the advance of quantum machine learning and similar emerging techniques. And so when you fix this issue in the AES key schedule, as we did, by replacing it with cryptographically secure mechanisms, then those related key attacks, which exploit the fact, for instance, in cloud setting, that related keys might be used to encrypt various data, then simply vanishes. There is not anymore this possibility. And this is quite easily visible, probably if we do another podcast, I would like to demonstrate our encryption, because in our demos, you can very easily see that encrypting the same file using the same set of keys, just different subkey, for two files that are a copy one of another, will lead to dramatically different results. So much so that if you make what is called a diff between those files, and then you measure the Shannon entropy of that difference, it's almost 8 on the scale of 8. So it's almost perfectly randomly different from one time to the other, as opposed to the classical AES, where there are some statistical similarities which then allow some attacks. So that allowed us to go to 512-bit key size and even beyond safely. But typically we offer 512 because then we can adapt the whole supply chain, meaning also the exchange of keys using such things as Kyber, for instance, and also some stronger alternatives, and digital signing as well, with security parameters of similar strength. So the whole PQC offering, including the encryption with the symmetric cipher at 512-bit security. And please continue. I was a bit long to explain this.
No, it's okay. It's really interesting. I wish I understood everything, but that's just me. I'm sure there's going to be some listeners and on this that will understand it a little bit more. So kind of shifting a little bit of gear, towards like the company dynamics of QRC and share with us like how many people are on the team today? What's been the growth trajectory, over the last couple of years?
Yes. So speaking of our company at the global level, and including people in various roles, such as representatives, we can safely say that we are by now 21 persons, and this is expanding pretty quickly as we are going towards the deployment of the Quantum Computing Cybersecurity Preparedness Act. It's a very long name for a law that has been passed in December 2022 now, 2 years ago almost, in the US, and finally is starting to be deployed as the first standards by NIST, enabling those this law to be enacted were published a few months back, and which means now there is no more excuse for various federal um, agencies and departments not to deploy the law. Everything is in place so that it can be deployed, and we see this slowly but surely starting. Some RFIs have been published, which we work on, etc., etc. And we just saw, by the way, speaking still of the same subject, that NIST decided to, despite different directions being taken, for instance, in Europe, to maintain that the solution was to switch to PQC rather than having hybrid deployments for a while. And we believe that's the right way to go. So we really are in sync with NIST on that part. Maybe less so on the timing, because they give a very ample time to do the migration, so much so that we believe the objective of the law to migrate all of the federal government by 2035 might not be attained if we take such a prudent, in the wrong sense of the term in our view, approach. But well, those things can always be debated. The White House does know our position to that regard. Anne Neuberger was speaking at an event a year and a half ago related to DOE, and we had a direct Q&A exchange where we asked, why don't you advance this deadline in the law to 2025, which is now next year? And essentially, the White House agreed in principle with us, but then, of course, explain all the practical implications of the different stakeholders, and that very importantly, not only the government needed to migrate, but all of their infrastructure providers, such as the telcos, etc. So if they are listening to us, yes, I'm talking to you, and we really need to do something about it. Now, it's past time to start, but you probably have more questions.
Yeah, so you have 21 people today, and are you guys globally distributed, or are the majority of the team members located in a specific area?
I would say it's essentially in the Western world, and with some people that are in Asia as well. Speaking of the representatives, mostly South and Southeast Asia, and as it regards the development, it is Europe and Northern America.
Very cool. And so, Stiepan, the core question I always like to dive into for a little bit with our guests is, you've got this globally distributed team. You've got a few handful of different roles that everyone plays. In this early stage, most, if not all, of your team members are foundational. How have you gone about finding these team members and convincing them to join this company and this initiative?
It has been a lot via online exchanges, though obviously some of them, especially in Switzerland, where originally this all started, I met through my network, which is more of a, let's say, face-to-face meeting nature. So I would say it's a mix, but which is pretty heavily skewed towards online meetings, which, of course, in most cases then are extending into physical meetings, because we like to actually meet for real, if I may say so, with the people we are working with. And so in most, if not all cases, we, at the very least, met once with the people that we work with.
Very cool. So, I mean,
and we have no North Koreans to date.
Got it. That's funny. Well, that's awesome. So So what has been the biggest lesson that you've learned in building this globally distributed team?
Well, it makes you learn about time zones synchronization, which, as we saw today, my apologies again for being late, is not always the easiest. And beyond that, we we also were able to develop a very interesting tool for online meetings. So that was I hope you still hear me. That was during COVID. We developed an alternative to Zoom. First and foremost, with the Indian market in mind. It was called Meet, and we still have it, but more as an internal / with partners meeting tool than public product offering. And actually, it's quite interesting because it was because of COVID that we had to develop a Zoom alternative that allows people to still communicate, but without being exposed to all the cybersecurity and, in this precise case, geopolitical issues tied to Zoom, which, in case you didn't know, is mostly developed in China. So we made this on the spot and, let's say, along the way, but it worked well to the point that we adopted it. That is the second version of it as our main internal company communication tool. Actually, we could have had this meeting that one. I believe we intended in the first place to have it the first date that we had set, but then somehow there was misunderstanding about the exact date and time. But anyways, this is a tool that we have on top of everything that we do in terms of cryptography, and that we are working to integrate with our encryption stack now that we have it in Rust, namely, that's the name of the programming language for memory safety. That is the most popular these days, and that we ported our stack to. And this means it runs in a browser, in a web browser. So everything that we do runs natively in a web browser at high speed, which
Very cool. So
signifies that, sorry, just a few more words on this, that the integration of our encryption stack with whichever web app is, I must say, straightforward. By now, obviously, there is still some question of browser support for PQC, but precisely by having everything run in a browser, we can actually compensate the lack of support for PQC by some browsers by deploying it. It is a form of compiled JavaScript that allows to have high performance, even though everything runs inside the web browser.
very cool. Yeah. So you, just to kind of reiterate that, so one of the biggest things you've had to learn to work through is time zone alignment across, all your people, which I can for sure is a challenge, so that's a valuable thing to learn and figure out. And then it sounds like, building your own tool for streamlining, communication or, video conferencing, that's protected and secured as well, has made a good impact. So we're about out of time for the podcast. But David, I'm so sorry. Stiepan, it's been great getting to know you and learning about QRC. I think that quantum computing in general is something that is still so foreign for the majority of people in the world. And so having people like you and companies like QRC coming in and building the future of that and helping us, be protected against the future capabilities and current capabilities of quantum computing. I think I'm excited to see what you guys accomplish and see what your continued growth looks like.
Maybe a few last words, if I may.
Sure.
We just completed the alpha version of our quantum resistant real-time operating system, and you will soon hear more about it. But that's the next big thing for us and the subject of one of our recent patent applications, which we know is a dire need to have systems that are by default and by design at that level of security that we provide. So that's not yet ready for production, but it is on a very good path, and you will soon hear more about it.
Very cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap up our episode of the Distro Podcast. Thanks again, Stiepan, for joining and being our guest today and representing QRC. Yeah, we can go ahead and end the recording, Christy.
Thanks a lot, Andrew, for having me, and looking forward to our further exchanges.
Yeah, Stiepan, I'd actually love to connect with you and talk more about what we are doing